Hello again, welcome to another video with Mr. Loveland. This time round we're going to be looking at the marking grid, well I call it a grid, the marking criteria for the AQA resistant materials coursework. And I'm going to take you through a sheet I've shown my kids recently that helps me and them to understand what's required from them and how we're going to break the marks down. So on your screen right now you should be seeing a grid that someone else made. I got this from Tez's website and I've used this for years. I think this is a really helpful way of looking at it. So at the top you've got the research section, and then the development section, the making and the evaluation, and then the communication at the bottom. And the page is laid out that as you look at it, the left hand side of the page is the weak marks and the right hand side of the page is the strongest marks. So this is exactly the same words that come from the AQA criteria. They've not put it in any kind of student speak. So I like to get my students familiar with this. I think it's fair that they know exactly what the exam board require from them. I've tried putting it in student speak in the past and I found I've ended up dumbing down what the exam board are after. So I just try and raise their comprehension to what the exam board are looking for. Do excuse me if my eyes move away. I'm just looking at my computer screen every now and again to remind myself what I'm saying. So we've got the basic sheet that this guy from, or this may be a girl from Tez, created. Here you can, I think it's, if you search the internet you can find this one. I've then updated it ever so slightly and tried to summarise each line with what that line is about, because each line is effectively a different task. And I've also just split it up so that I can see how much each line is worth. For example, in the 32 mark developing ideas section, it's quite simple. If we say it's roughly 30 marks rather than 32, and there's 6 lines, then that's an average of 5 marks per line. So as I mark my sheets, I get a highlighter, and I move, I highlight from left to right depending on how much of that particular line my kids have got, and that allows me to then give feedback to my class as a whole as to where there's generic weaknesses and holes in their coursework, and I can then feedback to the whole class, because that's what we're allowed to do, ways and means of attacking these general areas of weakness. So if we have a look at the one I've adapted, I've colour coded it because I work in colour, and I'm just going to take you through briefly what these lines mean. I'm sure they'll be familiar with you, but I found it helpful to break it down. The first section you're probably very familiar with, except possibly the top line, the very first line where there's only something in column on the right hand side. The essence of that column is that your mood board or your product analysis feeds into your creative ideas. So I get my guys to put a picture on their mood board, and then one of their design ideas has to be based on that picture, and they put a little small picture next to their creative idea. The second line, understanding the problem, I get mine to do a spider diagram and a mood board, and analyse any keywords. That one done. Existing products, you know that. You have to look at a bunch of products and analyse what is good, or pull up, what do I say to my guys? Pull up some facts about the product and then evaluate whether the fact is good or bad, whether it makes the product better or worse, and then apply it to your own product. So will you take the aspect or will you not? If you do those 3 things to 4 products, I give them top marks for that. Analyse the research. They need to summarise what they've learnt from their research page and how it helped. A specification. I tell my team that their spec must be specific, justified and measurable. So we use Access FM. For all our spec points, they have to say because at the end of the it must blah blah blah, because blah blah blah, and where possible make it measurable. Phrase it like a test. So the easiest one is size. Don't say it must be large. How do you measure large at the end of the evaluation? Tell me it must be greater than 300 mil, because then you can get a rule at the end to measure that. And then the target market. again, I get my guys to put a picture of one of their classmates, because then they can easily get feedback throughout the course, and then they tell me about how much they earn, where they spend their time, what their hobbies are. That's the C to D grade stuff. The A to B grade kids are applying that to their project, because my client wants to throw the little speaker that he's making into his bag because he listens to it as he plays football with his mates. Therefore, I will make mine robust. And now to where the real meat of the marks is, the section 2. 5 lines here. Line 1, creative ideas. You're probably familiar with that. I've got a couple of videos on how to get some creative ideas out there, how to develop them. Don't miss out the last couple of boxes on this one that demand ongoing research. As part of your development process, you need to find something else out. So a classic one is, if you're using plywood, tell them to go and find out what sorts of ply there are out there. If they're doing a children's toy, get them to go and do a little bit of research on toxic paints, something like that, and then that feeds back into their project. The planning line, the next line in development, I find pretty much looks after itself. If there is a flow to their thought process, if I can see an idea or a bunch of ideas, and then they select the best one, and then they develop that, and they model it, and they come up with a final solution, as long as there's a flow, that line looks after itself. And that line will look after itself if they do everything else right. And then we come to a line that students often struggle with, and I've actually got a video just on this line. Social, moral and environmental. Watch my video on that one. I get guys to underline it in green. I find an average of 5 comments on all the development pages is enough for that. The A to B grade kids need to be looking at 6 or 7 comments per page in my mind. They really need to show they're nailing it. The same is true for the 5th line, the material properties, exactly the same. I've got another video on that one, underline it in red. The modelling page, or the modelling line, I tell my guys to use 5 different types of modelling. I tell them to use a paper model to get sizes right. I tell them to use card, just bits of card they stuck together, to work out final sizes, and get a 3D model. We've got some blue styrofoam and a little hot wire cutter that we use, so they can use that to generate 3D shapes or other aspects of the design, although I tend to get them working in card because it's cheaper. And then I always try to get some kind of CAD in there if I can. We've only got 2D design, or SketchUp. SketchUp's great for some CAD work. And then whatever final material they're using, I get them to do some tests in the final material, testing joints, testing how they're going to construct it. A little mark on the CAD. CAD's brilliant because it ties into the final line in this section. If you can do something in 2D design, then they can make it life size. It's so easy for them to then pick their final sizes from the CAD work. Or if they make a life size model, rather than having to draw an orthographic drawing, which the exam board don't require, they can simply take a picture of their life size model, put that picture onto a page, and then annotate that model. Because the next line, line 6, requires you to have 3 things, and this line is really unclear. It says it's a manufacturing specification. It doesn't say what that means. What that means, according to AQA training, is they want 3 things. They want a final picture with sizes, they want a cutting list, and they want a making plan. I get my guys to do the sizes like I've just said, from SketchUp or from the model. The cutting list follows fairly smoothly on from that. And then honestly, I tell my people to write their plan of make after they've made it, but just write it as though it's future tense, because they don't really know how they're going to make it before they make it. So make it easy for them. Do it at the end, but write it future tense. Right, the making section, this pretty much looks after itself. If they have 2 things, if they have reasonable complexity, and if they have high quality finish. And in essence, the less complex and badly finished jobs are on the left hand side and weak marks. The slightly more complex and well finished jobs are right on the far right hand side. And just make note that you can have something beautiful, but if the finish is poor, then you are not allowed to give them the maximum marks for this. So the quality of finish is almost the most important thing. Really nail them on a high quality finish if you can. Right, the next section, 12 marks for evaluation. So there's 4 marks per line here, I tell them. Line 1, evaluate throughout and get third party. Well, I've actually got a video on this as well. I tell my guys to evaluate against the spec for each idea on their development pages, just a little box, watch my video, and get some client feedback on those pages. If there's lots of that interspersed throughout, then it's very easy for you to give them maximum marks. Line 2, evaluate against the spec. Well, if your spec was written with measurable comments at the start, then it's really easy at the end to perform the test that effectively your spec is worded like, and then write a result for that test. So every spec point should be tested at the end on your product. The exam board really like it if they can see the product in use. So if you can get your guys or girls to send their products home, get a picture of their little brother or their mum or their dad or whoever the client is using it somewhere outside the classroom, it just convinces them that it's being used in a real world environment. And if you can get some client feedback as well at that point, that really helps. You want client feedback at the very end. And the last line, commercial and production modifications. This means 2 things. This means that they want you to say how you would improve the product if you were to do it again. And this is a great place for you to throw any improvements out that you weren't able to put into your making process. And then they want commercial modifications. If you were to make 1,000 of these, how would you change it? So there you're looking at mass production and changing the materials, changing the joints to faster joints, changing any components to standardized components, changing finishes to quicker drying finishes, all those sorts of things. And then the last 6 marks, again, those are more self-evident. No irrelevant content, clear technical language, and spelling and grammar. So I hope that's been helpful to you. This is certainly something that I find my kids are picking up. It emphasises the importance, certainly in the development section, of not just drawing. I find kids in the past have given me pages and pages of beautiful sketches, and I can only give them a maximum of about 3 marks without any further research, until they put the labels in, until they put the social and the material properties, until they model. It's worth nothing. So this just helps to clarify what's going on with that. Hope this is helpful. Until next time, goodbye.